I heard a woman playing the flute in Donegal recently. She sat as straight as a sally rod, with closed eyes, and her breath in the barrel of the instrument made a sound as beautiful as the beginning of the universe. "Vi me fui driocht," I said, when she arrived at the bar. We were attending the Scoillivre Gidor. "Oh," she said, "it's good to be here." "Yes," I agreed, or as the great Cavan guru once said, "It's good to be anywhere." I could see she was weighing up whether to take her drink back to the circle of musicians or have a break and lean against the counter and share time with me. "It's good to be anywhere," she said, repeating my words. "That's a good one." "It is," says I. "It's a good one." What would happen next? No one could tell, but I was beside myself with anticipation. I lost my enthusiasm for flirting a few years ago, when I was depressed. But she was looking at me with such a curious smile that I dared be bold. "I've been watching you closely," I whispered. "Are you a guard?" she whispered back. "No," I replied, "but I drive a Citroen." She thought that was funny because she didn't understand it. And fortunately, she didn't ask me what Citroens had to do with guards, because I wouldn't have had an answer. That's the lovely thing about flirting. You can say the first thing that comes into your head. "Do you fancy a mountain in the morning?" I wondered. "No," she replied, "I don't think so." And then she walked away to the circle of musicians with her pint of stout, like a chieftain's daughter turning her back on the stable boy. The following morning, I pulled myself together at the bathroom mirror, acknowledging a sense of shame at having drank too much, and then I went walking alone. I walked up beyond the city of villages that constitutes West Donegal, into the high, rocky hills, where I could see the scree of Errigal almost touching the clouds above me, and the shadow of Torre stretching below me along the rim of the ocean. Only a few ugly windmills marred the view. At the bar that evening, she stood close to me and said, "Do you have peanuts?" "Only dry roasted," I said, munching at the nuts in a little silver bowl. "I hate dry roasted ones," she said. It's not that there's anything erotic about peanuts, but what makes flirting work is spontaneity and the unimportance of the subject. It's like playing tennis without the ball. "Do you like crisps?" I wondered. "Only in a sandwich," she said. "Ah, yes," I agreed. "There's nothing to compare with a good crisp sandwich." The rapport had returned, and then she expressed her longing for salty peanuts in pornographic detail. I was experiencing a kind of sudden love moment. The sentences were floating between us without any boundaries, as if we were a single mind. I suppose everyone is looking for that sudden love moment, when you meet a stranger and feel that you have known them for 1,000 years, when the ego dissolves into a fog of spontaneity and you feel at one with the other, and when everything you say seems to be funny. But, says I, talking to you is like taking down the fences and letting the sheep mingle. Now, I may have been just a tad too overexcited, but she didn't get it. She just laughed as a big man in an Aran sweater, who really did look like a guard, came up behind her holding 2 pints of Guinness and said, "I have a seat in the corner. Are you coming?" And she didn't even introduce him. She just went, showed me the back of her hand. Again she walked away. Well, I suppose there's nothing as sad as a flirtatious comment that falls flat. But I stood my ground at the bar and listened later as she lifted the flute and blew long mellow notes out of it, her back like a sally rod, and her long hair flowing all over the place. And I listened with reverence until the music dissolved the entire lounge, and the fences and the windmills and the sheep and even my shame and her beauty all dissolved into a mellow unity. The following day I faced myself in the bathroom mirror again before breakfast, and it occurred to me that it might be time to give up the drink for a while and acknowledge that Christmas is finally over. Well, now, I wrote that about 7 years ago. I first went to Scoil Givry in Gweedore about 7 years ago. Had a wonderful time, was having a bit of fun. I was on my own because I had gone up to actually open the festival that year, and then I was flirting around and drinking too much. And there's always this time of year where just somewhere around New Year's Eve you say to yourself, I've had enough drink, I need to go off it for a while. And then you start making your New Year resolutions. That was me 7 years ago. Now here's the funny thing. I was up in Gweedore again this week, 7 years later, for Scoil Givry, the winter school. They have workshops on flute and fiddle and all the different instruments, and Edwina Guckian was there. She was teaching Shannos dance and workshops, and she was also doing a lovely show last night in Arklen Gweedore. She had a fiddle player, a guitar player. She had Cathy Jordan, the singer, on the bodhrán and singing an amazing rendition of the Galway shawl, and she had herself, and she had a whole troupe of dancers from Leitrim, and they were absolutely brilliant. And she put on a wonderful show, and it was fierce interesting. She gave the whole history of, Shannos dancing and how it sits into the culture and what happened and how did it flourish and how was it suppressed. And it was just a wonderful evening, and just listening to the music and watching the dancers. That was in Arklen Gweedore last night. And the previous night, they had an event to celebrate the work of a fella called Campbell. He was a great fiddle player. And again, the place was full of fiddle players, and all of them had stories about this great fiddler, Campbell, who died a couple of months ago, maybe just nearly a year ago. And it brought to life a place called the Glen Tavern which is near Glenties, up the hills, and it just brought the whole place to life. Like, you could see how fiddle playing is such a part of the fabric of that community. And again, a wonderful night was had. So 2 massive, brilliant days up there in Gweedore at the festival. And I just thought, for New Year's Eve, I would read you that. Now, I know for some, if you're listening to this, immediately as it goes out, well, it's not New Year's Eve. Tomorrow night's New Year's Eve. But I'm talking as if it is New Year's because this is for Saturday night, 2022, last day of the year. And wishing you all a very happy New Year and thanking you for your support. You know, there are hundreds of people they're enjoying the podcast just like you, and it makes me feel so grateful that I'm able to do it, that I'm blessed with you as people who listen. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very happy New Year. And I'm going to be here through the next few months again, even though I will be on the road with I call it a new show. You know, I love going in front of an audience with no script. So what I do is I get my book. Whenever I have a new book, all the things that are left unsaid is my new book, and I will be going around the country. I think I'm starting somewhere like in the Hawkswell in Sligo, and I'll be in Limerick and Dublin, the Pavilion, Dunleary, Driocht, I'll be in Dundalk, I'll be in all sorts of places around the country, and on Grianon in Letterkenny, and I go on stage for about 75, 90 minutes, and I have no plan, but I pick things in the book and I read them and then I reflect on them. And it's very much like the podcast. I suppose I probably don't get as intimate, as personal about my own faith experience when I'm on stage. I try and keep it to comedy, I try and keep it to a lightness. Well, I'll be doing that through the next 3 or 4 months, but I'll also be keeping you updated on where I am and where I'm going to be the following week. And maybe even if you're in a region, we could meet. It'd be lovely. I'll be doing that, but I'll still be doing the podcast. I thought that for New Year's Eve, I would continue and complete and finish with this time of just storytelling. I've done it over, I think, 3 podcasts now or 4, and I'm just sharing stories that I'm fond of, I suppose, from the years gone by. And most of them, or all of them, have come out of the Irish Times column. Here's another one. It's a little memory from 2013. On my way to Galway, I stopped in a charity shop and met an old woman with a coloured hat and lots of bags, who looked like she was on medication because she was chatting away to herself. She seemed so wonderful and unconventional that I forced myself into her private world to say hello. She wasn't used to people saying hello, and though she replied with a blessing, she kept her eyes to the ground and listened with a wary tilt of her head. "You're a Roscommon woman, I suppose?" I inquired. She grunted. "If you were on the road all your life, you would have no home too," she said, as if she was in the middle of a different conversation. Then she looked me in the eye. "I never settled anywhere," she declared. "And where were you born?" I wondered. "I don't know," she said, still eyeing me. "I'd love to be able to say where, but I'm camping out all my life, and it pains me to talk now because I have a shortness of breath from the heart, and I never have conversations, and so you'll excuse me, sir, if I don't talk to you." I felt I had invaded her space, so I apologized. "You done nothing wrong, sir," she said. "'Tis no harm." And then she repeated herself, reciting the words slowly and carefully, as if she was being interrogated by some tyrannical but invisible policeman. "I don't know where I was born, and I've never had a home." "Well, happy Christmas," I said. "Same to you," she replied, shielding herself from my sentimentality as she waddled out the door, looking straight ahead. I was heading to Galway for a carol service in St. Nicholas's Collegiate Church near Shop Street, which was glowing inside with hundreds of little candles, and all the pillars were draped in shadows, and the darkness seeped in the windows and filled the vaulted ceiling, and the choir wore Christmas hats. When I was a child, I loved playing with the Christmas crib. I'd get out the baby Jesus and his mother, and the shepherds and their animals, and I'd play with them, and shine a torch through the roof to create moonlight in the stable. When I was a teenager, I loved going into pubs where girls in Santa hats and miniskirts of red velvet with white furry hems and black stockinged haunches pressed up against me with their hot whiskies. When I became a parent, I loved collaborating with Santa to make the world perfect. The old green shed behind the house became a storeroom. Santa stored presents in there until Christmas Eve. Then he'd come down the chimney with big dirty boots and leave snow tracks all over the carpet, even when it wasn't snowing outside. The shed was painted green one summer by 3 beautiful boys who came in a white van on a blue day and said they possessed the best paint in the universe. Paint that was used to colour the ships that came from Harland and Wolff, they said. Paint that would never come off in 1,000 years of wet Leitrim's. So they sprayed it on and vanished down the road in a white hiace. And for years we used to store the debris of our past in that shed. Things that didn't last. Manual typewriters, old record players, and telephone answering machines. Long forgotten furry toys in black plastic bags. A hammer that was lost and never found. A high-heeled shoe enfolded in a cobweb, and a picture of Jesus on his mother's knee that hung on the wall of the house when we bought it. The cat had kittens in that shed one year, but a prowling Tom arrived soon after and left the little kittens strewn around the yard like wet gloves in the rain. When the shed had been battered by 20 Leitrim winters, the green paint peeled off, and it looked so ugly that we knocked the shed. In winter, I am overwhelmed by darkness, because the dark is the only thing that remains unchanged in 1,000 Leitrim winters. And I realise that all the sheds and stables and Celtic tiger mansions cannot last. And in truth, I cannot say where I came from or where I'm going, or when, if ever, the darkness will lift. Which I suppose is what makes the fragility of candlelight so beautiful, and the idea of God camping on the side of the road with a homeless woman. So powerful. Well, I was reminded of two things when I was going over that reflection. One is that another thing happened at Christmas. Santa used to, as I say, store things in that shed. And one year he stored a bicycle for a young girl in the shed. But for some strange reason, Santa forgot to take off the label, the price tag off the bicycle. And the little girl got her bicycle from Santa, but she observed to herself, would you look at where he bought it? And would you look at the price he paid for it? And it made the bicycle actually sort of real in a way that things from Santa had always previously been quite magical. And when she tried to sort of filter that information into the rest of her notions about Santa, like why would he buy the presents and why would he buy them in Leitrim? Well, I can tell you it sort of changed her life. And so we all grow up. I mentioned there as well at the end of that about the darkness, because I have sometimes been plagued with darkness, metaphor for depression, and it has come on me in 2011, and it stayed with me like a great fog until about 2014. And in that time I was physically not well, and at the same time I was also in a condition where I didn't realize that the physical illness might have been causing the depression. So I went to a psychotherapist. I went for a season. I would go for about 6-8 weeks every week, one winter, and then I would try and live out the sort of new experiences that had evolved from conversations with the psychotherapist. And then the next year I'd go back to her again for another season. I did that 3 times. And I covered lots of things I was uneasy about and lots of kind of unconscious stuff that I was projecting onto other people and lots of reasons that probably were causing depression. And at the end of those 3 years, I felt that she had given me a great gift. She had helped me in enormous ways to free myself from that awful, awful trap of being caught in depression, and particularly being caught in negative emotions. You know, where there's negative voices in your head and they're talking against you, they're really tormenting you, they're undermining everything you do in your head. And very often, I think, with me as well as with other people, it's because you have internalized that pattern of negativity from other people who may have been negative to you or destructive to you when you were young. So you get kind of a real inundation of negativity from people around you when you're young, and you just internalize it, and then the voice in your head is able to go on. Years later, when you're on your own, you still live with this negative voice, so that it disempowers you from doing things. It disempowers you from wearing sometimes nice clothes. Every time you look in the mirror with a new jacket, the voice says you look terrible in that. Do you know that kind of voice? And it can really be destructive. And then sometimes when illness comes, the voice intensifies. The voice kind of says, well, see, now look what's happened. See where you are now. You'll not get better now. And it just goes black and black. So I was there. I went to the psychotherapist, and I kind of found I was empowered and I liberated myself from all that. It was good. The psychotherapy was really good insofar as it went to the edge of something. But there's a great proverb in Islam. They say, language can bring you to the door of the house, but it cannot bring you into the house. And I felt there was a threshold. There was a threshold in my own consciousness, in my own inner awareness, that I could go so far using the language that I had developed with the therapist to name various bits of darkness and light in my psyche, to make meaning of the universe that I was living in and to liberate myself from depression. I was able to use language that the psychotherapist was giving me, but at the same time, all the time it would just bring me to the edge of something, a threshold I called it. And I didn't know what was beyond that threshold, what is deeper in me than all this. And I didn't know until accidentally, on a June evening on the patio in 2016, an icon appeared in front of me. It resurrected in me my old Christianity, my faith as I had been brought up with. And I said, look at this icon. I am going to take this icon to my heart, to my room, and I am going to practice with it and see, is this the threshold? And it was. For me, it was. For other people, it could be something else would give you that deeper threshold. It could be something from Christianity or other major religious traditions, or it could be from some secular world. It could be from loads of different places where you kind of go beyond the language of psychotherapy itself and begin to use the language of faith. You begin to live by symbols. Being one with Christ, or Christ living in you, becomes a symbolic language that actually has a transformative power in your consciousness. That's what happened to me 2016. And that will be 7 years, which is a kind of a complete term, if you like. It'll be 7 years this summer. And so for January until summer during podcasts, I think I'll probably be reflecting on that and looking at, what is the shape that has emerged from those 7 years of trying to open my mind and heart. Now, when I say that I'm opening my mind and heart to the Christian message, it doesn't mean I'm actually better as a person. I mean, I think I'm still exactly the same selfish person I was, and I think in some sense we don't really change that much in life. But there's a threshold in our conscious mind. There's some kind of threshold where you go beyond it, you go deeper into the house. It's like you experience as if you're being held by somebody else, as if there is another who is watching you, but not just watching, but like loving you. And that sense of presence of a loving mother, if you like, enfolding you, enveloping you, minding you every single second of the day, whether you're sleeping or waking, that presence begins to replace what used to be there, the negative presence, the destructive voice in your head that's going on all the time, disempowering you and not allowing you to be joyful. And gradually through various symbolic practices, whether they be going to churches or meditating or whatever is your fancy, whatever is the way you pray is the right way for you, whatever religion you have, that's the true religion. And if you have a religion that is an eclectic mix or is in somehow made up of your own private devotions, your own private rituals with little candles or little flowers, then that's the right religion. That's the true religion for you, because that's the way that you will use symbols. And symbols, as you live symbols, you transform your life. When you say, I am the child of the great mother, the great cosmic mother. When you say that Christ, the cosmic Christ, who is alive in the light and the energy and the nuclear power of every single atom, this Christ reaching fulfillment only in the omega point at the end of all time. This is Christ in me at this moment. This is my light. So when you use language like that, you're talking symbolically. And everything that we did at Christmas, if we went to churches, we were listening to sacred scriptures, which are not history lessons, but are simply the recitation in symbolic and ritual form of memories, collective memories. And it's also about that, in Christian terms anyway, it's about that beautiful and wonderful breaking of bread. Living symbolically. Living on the bread of angels. I found, to be honest, that was the door, that was the threshold for me. That allowed me to go deep. Well, I'll share with you another memory now. And this is a memory from 2011, if you don't mind. Big events don't frighten me. The imminent collapse of the euro or the implementation of the budget leaves me unmoved. Remember, this is 2011, December 2011. The IMF were in the country, if you remember them. But it is in tiny things that I fail, and in tiny failures that I am terrified. It is not on the ocean, but in small places that I perish. In fact, I don't even feel I'm included in big events. I listen to budgets and announcements about economic cuts as if I didn't quite belong to that world anymore. I feel alienated, anonymous, helpless and lonely. Lying in bed at 8 a.m. in the morning, in the dark, wondering, should I turn off the radio and get up? Which is why I get up, because I have to try. A greeting card lying in the hall on Tuesday from someone in Clare contained a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Happiness is at your fingertips. All you have to do is reach out and touch it. But there was no name on the card, which infuriated me. I decided to vacuum clean the front room. At least that would be an achievement. I plugged in the machine and unravelled the flex and rubbed the carpet a few times and noticed that there was dust on the sofa from an incense stick I burned the previous night. I dismantled the long arm of the hoover and poked the short nozzle into the crevices and around the armrests. But before I could stop it, the machine sucked up a €10 note that was wedged behind a cushion. My change from a naggin of brandy. I saw the money fly up the spout, but I couldn't stop it. I had to open the machine, and of course the bag inside was impossible to penetrate with my fingers, so I ripped it apart in a rage and poked the dust and found the money. I spend a lot of time alone in a house that has become my study and refuge. There's no one there but me, and after the episode with the hoover, I was full of unfocused rage, so I drove into town. I went to a bakery and chose a cherry cake and said, "That's a miserable day." Now, in fact, it was mild and dry. "Well," the woman behind the counter said, "it's not that bad." But I said, "Yesterday was rough." She said, "It's not freezing and it's not pouring rain." "True," I agreed, "but it's very dark." "It's December," she said. And although a Cavan Lake can be a foggy world in early December, I went for a walk that afternoon in Killikeen Forest Park, and to my great relief, the lake was grey and full of light. The lower half of the sky was a pale watercolour, and the woods around me were comforting. Suddenly the sky darkened and hailstones surprised me. I stood under a tree until they ended as abruptly as they had begun, and standing before me was a squirrel, a red squirrel, beautiful in shape, colour and fur, and independence of mind. He cast his imperious eye on me for a moment and then raced up a tree to some unknown world. There are unknown worlds all around in the forest, and it's easy to believe in a veil beyond which humans go to small eternities when this life is over. But I didn't realize that the dark woods can hold so much light. Every last bit of colour in the evening sky lingered in the trees. Every way I looked, light came towards me. And even the potholes of rain on the pathway sucked in the twilight and gathered it and threw it back at me. And it's strange how, being so far removed from electric light, I could hear voices deep within me and feel great realizations dawning, like in a dream. For example, it's not the woods that frighten me. It's death. The unbearable feeling is not that I will eventually be annihilated, but that things will go on and I won't be there. I suppose that's what kept me at parties when I was young. I could never bear to leave a buzzing room. Like dreams, realizations come in two parts. After the thought of death, which made me shiver, I remembered again the morning's greeting card. And so I reached out my hands in the wood and sensed the breath of twilight on them, and knew instantly that I had reached a moment of the day that is commonly described as bliss. I suppose it's that key line from Thich Nhat Hanh, isn't it? Happiness is at your fingertips. All you have to do is reach out and touch it. I think that's what I was saying last week about Christmas, that Christmas has this sense of darkness in the imagery, in the symbolism, and it's sometimes about really finding the light in the darkness. Sometimes, like Killikeen is a very beautiful place, but when it's dark in December and it's twilight and you're in the woods around Killikeen and Cavan, it's a dark place and lonely place to be. And it sort of embodied my feelings of melancholy and depression at the time. And simply just to reach out my hands and become aware that I belong here, I belong in this beautiful, strange universe, that seemed to be enough. Just to reach out the hands and awaken and feel not just that I'm present here in this wood, but the wood is like present to me. The wood is like some hidden face watching me. And that's the threshold. I suppose in the 7 years since I started reaching beyond psychotherapy and finding a language of faith, that has been the biggest consolation. The feeling that sometimes I am present, but it's also being aware that a presence other than mine is reaching out to me, is touching me. And it comes through the cosmos around me, through the ordinary environment that I live in. I'm talking to you from the shed studio in the hills above Loch Allen. This is the shed studio that I built when we knocked down that old galvanised shed. Life goes on. You never plan what will be built next. And I'm so grateful just to be alive, to begin a new year as if this year was the most precious. As if 2023 was more important than 2016 or 2019 or 1960 or 1980. That in some sense, all those other years are present in me in some strange way. They're not in the past. They're like present. And then 2023 becomes the surface, the new intensity of being present. That's what I want to, I suppose, say to you on New Year's Eve. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being present. And I hope that you experience a sense of the greater presence, the higher, wonderful, transcendent presence. No matter what your idea of God or no God, no matter what your idea of faith, or no matter what your religious tradition, that you will be here now, that you will be present in this year more than you ever were in any other year of your life, that this is the year that will be absolutely, completely precious, and the first day of it will be a day of renewal in your body, your mind, your heart. A time of great healing begins when you step into that moment of presence. That's what I mean when I say, Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. Have a great year. Bye-bye.